I want to talk with you about a simple way to train your brain to lower anxiety. And this is going to have to do with how we work with our thoughts. Because what we often don't realize is that our thoughts are constantly telling us stories. And if we're prone to anxiety, those stories are often going to feed into feeling anxious, because they're going to be stories about bad things that are going to happen. That's going to contribute to that feeling of unease that we have. So it's a 3-step process. The first step is just to notice the thoughts. Notice that we're having thoughts. We can often take these thoughts for granted and not even realize that our minds are talking to us. So for example, if our loved one is late coming home, let's say, and we don't know where they are or why they're late, they're not answering our texts, we might think something terrible has happened. Maybe they've been in an accident or something. And with no evidence for that being the case, but we can start to believe that that's likely, that's actually happened. We can see the picture in our mind, we can imagine it, and start to kind of live in that reality. So that first step is so important, just to step back and notice that we're having thoughts. Notice that our minds are telling us these things. And then once we've done that, then we're in a better place to start to question that story. So step 2 is to take that objective look at that thought, at that prediction, question the story. And most likely, when we're having thoughts that lead to anxiety, the thoughts are going to be biased or distorted in one of 2 ways. One is the probability of what we're afraid of happening. So our brains are going to tell us it's really likely that that accident, for example, has happened. And the second is the severity, that we're going to imagine if something bad has happened, that it's going to be terrible. It's going to be more than I can deal with. So let's take a close look at those thoughts and ask ourselves, is it necessarily the case? Is it 100% true that this thing is going to happen? Is it definitely going to be as bad as I'm afraid it's going to be? Is it going to be the worst thing imaginable? Is it going to be something that I can't deal with? Because usually what we'll find is the thing we're afraid of is not that likely to happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be not as bad as we think. And it's going to be something that we can manage, that we can deal with. So those are the first 2 steps. The final step is to identify alternatives. Ask ourselves, what else might happen here? Maybe if it's that accident that I'm afraid has happened, maybe my loved one just got caught in traffic, or maybe they were on a phone call that lasted longer than they expected, and they can't answer my text because they're tied up with a call or a meeting or something. So we don't have to convince ourselves that the alternative is true. I have to make myself think that it's this other thing, this less frightening possibility. It's usually enough just to know that there could be something else going on, something that I haven't considered, and in fact is probably more likely than what it is that I'm afraid of. Because you can probably think of lots of times when you've assumed something bad has happened or is going to happen, and things actually turn out better than we expect. Not all the time. That's why we don't want to force ourselves to believe this, or make the fact that I'm not sure that this is actually what's happened, or I can't make myself stop fearing that this bad thing has happened. We don't want to get caught up in that kind of back and forth. Just notice that there are alternatives. So what I've described so far has been a kind of reactive way of dealing with thoughts. It's when I notice that I'm anxious and having frightening thoughts that I can go through this process, and that's great. It's a really valuable way to practice. But I really encourage people to do this proactively. That's where the training is going to come in. We can do this out of habit. One of the best ways to do it is in the morning. So first thing in the morning, start to fill your mind with thoughts of what great things are going to happen today. What things am I going to do well? What's going to turn out the way that I'm hoping it will today? Again, we don't have to convince ourselves those things are going to happen, but say these are things that are very likely to happen today. A second opportunity I think we can look for is when we're starting something new, like a new project at work, maybe starting a new recipe that we haven't done before. And start to see things going well, to practice getting our minds into a new routine. They've been in the routine of expecting the worst to happen. Now ask ourselves, what really good thing might come out of this? And the third, and it can be related to starting something new, but any kind of transition. Maybe when I'm transitioning from work to home, or maybe I'm stopping work to go meet someone for lunch. Just use those breaks as cues to notice what's on my mind. What kinds of predictions am I making? Am I expecting things to go badly at this lunch, for example, or whatever the case might be? Because the more consistently we can practice these things, the more we can start to really train our minds to see things differently and to get out of those habits of seeing worst case scenarios that have a lot to do with the anxiety that we feel. So let me know how this goes, and thanks for watching.